MudBlazor Components, Part 7. In Part 7 of the MudBlazor Components series, we'll be demonstrating the implementation of components starting with S. As more parts of the series become available, you'll find their links in the description below. Also, the description includes a GitHub link to all the source code. The MudBlazor Scroll-to-Top component does exactly that. Once the component appears, the user can click it to return to the top of the page. In this first example, we generate 100 paragraphs to allow scrolling. When the user gets near the end, the scroll-to-top element kicks in, and the user can click it to scroll back to the top of the page. This can be any clickable element like a button, or in this case, a MudFab. It's important to note where you place the scroll-to-top component. Here, it's on the page, so you would expect that it scrolls the page back. If, however, it was on a layout component like the app bar, then all pages inside the layout will scroll to the top. In the second example, we have a container div with an ID. Our scroll-to-top component here has the same selector ID as the container. This means it will only scroll the container back to the top. The top offset attribute specifies how many pixels the user must scroll before the scroll component appears. The visible CSS class and hidden CSS class can be used to format how the scroll component is displayed when visible or hidden. In this example, we used a button as element for the scroll component. The MudSimpleTable is a lightweight version of the full table component. It's primarily used for markup purposes. It doesn't take an items list, but rather you can manually specify the header and data row elements. Just like in the normal HTML table, you havethead, tbody, th, and td elements. The way we've defined them here looks a bit weird simply because instead of typing out the values, we split string arrays into the values for the elements. Here's the headings and the rows string arrays we use in our table layout. The simple table component itself has some handy customization properties. The fixed header will keep the header visible when the user scrolls. The dense property reduces the vertical height between rows. The hover property darkens the row the user hovers over. The bordered property draws lines around the cells, and the striped property will slightly change the color of each alternating row. Here's the fixed header in action. The hover property, the dense property, the stripe property, and the bordered property. The skeleton component can be used as a placeholder while items are being loaded, for example. They can have different shapes and animations. In this mudcard example, if loading is still true, show the skeleton placeholders. It can be a text, rectangle, or circular skeleton, and it can have a pulse, wave, or no animation. Once the user clicks the button, it toggles the loading bool to false, and the actual card content is displayed. With MudSnackbar, you can give the user a temporary pop-up message. It will automatically close after a specific time, or the user can close it with the Close button. The snack bar can contain HTML or complete fragments of HTML. Before you can use snack bars, you need to have the snack bar provider active. You can place this at layout level in the main layout.razor file. Then, on page level, you need to inject the snack bar service to create snack bars. Here we see an inline function to quickly add a simple snack bar. The next two examples call methods to add snack bars with more complex HTML content. The first method uses markup string to generate the HTML content. The second method adds an HTML fragment to the snack bar. You can specify the severity level of a snack bar. This will change both the color and icon displayed on the snack bar. Besides severity, you can do some configuration with the icon and close button. Here we have a snack bar whose icon is hidden, another snack bar with a custom icon, and a snack bar with no close button. To programmatically close a snack bar, you'll need a reference to the specific snack bar. When we add the snack bar, we configure it with a maximum visible time and get the reference to that specific snack bar. When the user clicks the Hide button, we check if the snack bar is still visible, then remove it. The snack bar can appear anywhere around the screen where you specify. Here, we call a method and pass it the snack bar message and a position. The method will configure the snack bar service to change its default position, then add the snack bar. The start and end positions works in conjunctions with your right to left settings. Another configuration is to close a snack bar when the user navigates to another page. You can do this by setting the close after navigation to true. You may want to perform some action when the user clicks on a snack bar or closes the snack bar. In this method, when the user clicks on the snack bar, it creates a new snack bar and completes the current snack bar task. In the second example, we set the snack bar to require some interaction and set its close button click function to run the say goodbye method. This method received the current snack bar, adds a new snack bar, and closes the current snack bar. To prevent duplicate snack bars, you can set the duplicate behavior to snack bar duplicate behavior prevent. For this to work, snack bars must have a key. If you try to add a snack bar with the same key, it will not be added. So in this case, where we have 3 snack bars with the same key, only the first snack bar will be created. So far, we've done a lot of page-level configurations. But if you want some of these settings to apply globally to all your snack bars, you can add configuration in your MUD services when you add it in the program.cs file. Some common configurations could be the position and visibility duration. The MudSpacer component expands and fills available space. Its size depends on the parent element's size. The split panel gives you a container with 2 sizable areas. The split can be either vertical or horizontal. You can specify rounded or square corners, transparent background, elevation height, or call a method to reset the sizing. Here we place the split panel inside a paper simply to demonstrate a transparent background. For the split panel, we gave it a reference variable in order to call the reset function. The other attributes are simply Bool variables. Inside the panel, you have a first panel and second panel where you can declare some content. Below the split panel, we have a button group with some toggle buttons to control the attributes of the split panel and a button to call the reset divider method on the split panel. The next example has a nested split panel. First, we see the outer split panel with the 2 panes split horizontally, one above the other. Then, inside the first panel, we have another split. The first panel has a list with text with overflow styling, so its content is scrollable. The MudStack is often used to arrange child items vertically or horizontally. It allows you to specify the spacing between items or if the items should be displayed in reverse. You can turn wrapping on or off, or manually specify line breaks in the row. By default, the stack will arrange items vertically, but you can specify horizontal by setting row to true. Use the spacing attribute to set the space between items and the reverse attribute to reverse the order of the items. To enable wrapping, use the wrap attribute when in row mode. Add line breaks in a row with the MudFlexBreak component. You change the spacing across its parent element with the Justify attribute. For vertical spacing, use the Align Items attribute. Finally, you can also stretch the first, middle, last, or all the items across its parent container. Use the Justify attribute for horizontal spacing, the Align Items attribute for vertical spacing, and the Stretch attribute for stretch settings. The MudSwipeArea captures user gestures such as swipe left to right or right to left and top to bottom and bottom to top. In our example, when the swipe ends, we capture the last swipe gesture and display it as text. The style of User Select None prevents the user from accidentally selecting the text while swiping. Here we track the horizontal and vertical offset in real time. To get real-time tracking, we handle the on-swipe move event. With this event, we can capture both the horizontal and vertical movement. Once the user stops swiping or leaves the swipe area, the values are reset. We have some double variables to hold our swipe offsets, a reference to the swipe area to cancel the gesture, and a list of swipe direction to hold the horizontal and vertical swipe direction. When the user moves, we capture the movement and assign the swipe delta offsets accordingly. When the user drags beyond the swipe area, we cancel the gesture and reset the offset values. The same whenever the user stops swiping, we also reset the offset values. Here's a more practical example where we use the swipe gesture to open and close a drawer component. We will handle the swipe end event to change the open state of the drawer. When the user swipes left to right and the drawer is not open, then open it. And of course, if the user swipes right to left and the drawer is open, then close it. Our final example handles dragging and dragging outside the boundaries of the swipe area. We have an outside div that displays the area in which the user can drag. The smaller inside div is the circle and icon. Its left and top offset will be changed when the user drags in the swipe area. Also, if the user drags beyond the specified borders, the icon will be displayed inside the circle. We assign the horizontal and vertical delta offsets for the second div's left and top offset. Then, if the offsets are outside some specific borders, we enable the icon. Thank you for watching our video. For more tutorials on C#, click subscribe. Give us a like so the video can be visible to more people.